Welcome back to Let's Have It Out. Still in the studio with me is the DA Head of Policy, Ngwenya. Gwen, thank you very much. So before the break, you mentioned that the traditional DA voters are liberal people. So what I want to know from you is, the ANC puts a lot of effort into explaining who they are and what their views are. They have their discussion documents and strategy and tactics, and the ANC claims to be a Marxist-Leninist organization and also a nationalist organization. The EFF is along the same lines, although they also claim to be Faninists. Who are the big political thinkers or the philosophers that the DA speak about when you have your policy discussions? Who are the people that you go to base your views on?
Well, I mean, obviously we draw a great deal from the party's own, historical figures that led the party and try and draw from the decisions they made when they were in government. Obviously Helen Suzman being, I think, the most prominent one in people's minds. But I think that's always I would say, a personal decision who one looks to as perhaps their kind of figures, I know, if we're going to talk broadly about the party, I think the most maybe striking figure might be in terms of Karl Popper's, the open society, because the DA often does allude to the fact that we stand for the open opportunity society for all. So in terms of a more prominent, in terms of our messaging, thinker that we perhaps have drawn for, I'd say it would have to be that. But of course, I mean, it would be much broader, Yeah.
So let's go to a Facebook comment. Let's go to Tabu from Mpumalanga. Before we go to Facebook, there's a caller. Tabu from Mpumalanga is on the line. Tabu, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. Good evening. How are you, sir?
Good evening. I'm very well, and yourself?
Yes, my question is, I would like to know, I was a DA voter, but then I turned back. My question is, why does the DA get so frustrated and talk loud when it's black people who does wrong things, but when it's white people, they keep quiet? A typical example, Helen Zille is Western Cape. They feel that she's not good enough to participate in the party activities, but they keep her as leading the province. How does that logic work for me? I think from that decision, I took my own decision that I will never vote for DA because they separate between white and black based on their actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gwen, what's your response to that?
Well, unfortunately, he didn't give examples of, black South Africans maybe that we have. There was one person that was raised, so I'm not getting a clear sense of differential treatment. But with regards to Helen Zille, I mean, anyone would recognize that she's a consummate, leader of government. The Western Cape has consistently outperformed many other provinces. It would be absolutely absurd to remove almost your senior politician in government over, communications uproar. And I think that probably the decision, at least the one she also agreed to, was to find a middle ground between saying, well, we're going to try and protect the political brand of the party, but still make sure that we run a decent and credible government in the Western Cape. And I think that was a difficult compromise to come to, but one the party seems to be managing quite well. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask a question that's almost the opposite of that. So the liberal position on freedom of speech, which I know you have strong views on, has always been, there's that famous line that my right to swing my fist only stops where your face begins. Yeah. So, and the same goes for freedom of speech. So the DA, having traditionally been, or still is to a degree, a liberal organization, I find that difficult to reconcile with the DA's statement about the Vicky Momberg judgment, for example, where the DA effectively said that they support, or you can interpret it as that the DA supports the imprisonment of people when they say things that are offensive. Clearly, that's not a liberal line to take, is it?
Well, this question for me is one that I've also thought about quite often, because it's interesting because, this is, even our courts have now ruled, which, of course, our constitution protects freedom of speech. So there's almost a legalistic answer in which you could say, well, we're just going to, we uphold the rule of law and, the legal process. And if our courts, which espouse, these freedoms, including the freedom of speech, think that it's perfectly in line with freedom of speech to make this kind of ruling, then we're going to support support the legal process. But of course, there's also the other line to say, well, maybe sometimes actually courts get it wrong. And I know that the DA did come out with a statement celebrating the sentencing. I do not personally celebrate it, and I'm not almost hesitant to say that, because I think we hold too high a bar for party unity if we think party unity means everyone in a political party thinks the same thing. I think South Africans will be comforted to know that any decision a political party makes comes out of a process of contestation, and that a decision has been made through debate, and hopefully any decision that's made comes out because it's a considered one and isn't one that's a product of some kind of dictatorial fiat, one person making decisions. So I'm happy to say I may have, had this been the product of ongoing discussion, debate in the party, I probably would have been one of those people to say, hang on, this ruling doesn't seem right to me, and I hope it's challenged. That's not to say that everyone will support that, but I think that's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah. So, well, let's hear what our viewers on Facebook have to say. Cello says, the DA is caught between a rock and a hard surface. They have to please both black and white, which is not possible. The DA's founding principles favor whites. For them to balance the two, they have to abandon some of those principles. Thank you for that comment. Gwen, do you think do you agree with that line of arguing? Is it impossible to favor both white people and black people? Is it true that your principles are originally favoring white people?
Well, again, unfortunately, it's a comment, so I can't enter into a kind of back and forth with someone who says that. But it would almost link back to what I was saying previously, that, the DA stands for a certain set of liberal values. Now, I don't, in my experience, feel that any of those work towards any particular race. I mean, certainly protecting individual rights, protect even people who might find, themselves to be oppressed by, a group other than a racial group, and there's different minorities, not just racial minorities. You could be, if you lived in a country where they didn't respect, sort of sexual freedoms, you might be happy to have a party that actually is going to protect individual rights. So the party stands, I think, for values that benefit a whole range of South Africans. Now, it may be true that perhaps the kind of people who are most attracted to liberal ideas perhaps tend to be more educated, and that's not to say that people who don't buy into liberalism, it's out of ignorance. I just think that, perhaps education exposes you to a broader set of principles and values, and people then tend to choose liberalism after certain, tend to correlate with a certain, I would say, level of education or perhaps even income status. And it's not for everyone. I mean, this differs. You will get people who are poor, who are uneducated, who buy into liberal values, and I think you'll find this the world over, not just in South Africa. So it becomes very difficult, I think, to say that it's just a black or a white issue. But again, if you aggregate it, it probably wouldn't be surprising that because of South Africa's history, the people who tend to be in a job and perhaps because they then own assets, and it's actually really that. When you own something, it's much easier then to attach to property rights. Why would you care vehemently about property rights if you don't own anything? Yeah. So that's also why I think it's important why we've driven things like title deeds, because I think the more people have a sense of ownership over things, the more they will be drawn to the kind of protections and values that the DA stands for.
So we're going to go to a quick break. After the break, I want to ask you about the DA's role in Parliament, and especially with reference to the antiques of the EFF.
Right.
After the break, we will take some of your questions and calls. Don't go away.